Welcome, gentle traveler, to a place where the world softens at its edges and time moves like honey dripping from a wooden spoon. Tonight, as the stars begin their slow dance across the velvet sky, we invite you to settle into this quiet moment, this sacred space between waking and dreaming. Let your shoulders drop, just a little. Let the weight you've been carrying all day begin to melt away, like snow touching warm earth. Feel the surface beneath you, whether bed or cushion or soft carpet, rise up to support you completely. You are held. You are safe. You are exactly where you need to be. Take a breath now, slow and deep, filling your lungs with the cool evening air. And as you breathe out, imagine releasing every worry, every busy thought, every small concern that has traveled with you through your day. Let them float away like dandelion seeds on a summer breeze, drifting up and up until they disappear into the gathering twilight. Tonight's story comes to us from ancient times, whispered across centuries by sailors who watched stars guide their ships across endless waters. It is a tale born in the markets of Baghdad, where merchants traded silk and spices, where the air shimmered with heat and possibility, where a young man named Sinbad once stood at the harbor's edge and dreamed of distant horizons. This is not a story of rushing or hurrying. This is a story that moves like the ocean itself, vast, patient, eternal. It is a story of courage that grows quietly in the heart, of wonders discovered slowly, of how even the longest journey begins with a single step onto a wooden deck that creaks beneath your feet. So let us begin, you and I, as the moon rises silver over the water and the first stars pierce through the deepening blue. Let us sail together into a world of gentle marvels, where even the strangest adventures unfold with the soft rhythm of waves against a hull. Breathe with me now. In and out. In and out. And let the story begin. Long ago, in the golden age of caliphs and caravans, in the great city of Baghdad, where minarets reached toward heaven and fountains sang in marble courtyards, there lived a young man named Sinbad. He was the son of a merchant, born to comfort and ease, raised in a house with cool tiled floors and rooms that caught the evening breeze. But Sinbad possessed something that would not let him rest in that comfort: a hunger for the horizon, a yearning for what lay beyond the city walls, beyond the desert, beyond the very edge of the maps that scholars drew on parchment scrolls. At night, he would climb to his rooftop and watch caravans departing, their camels laden with goods, their bells chiming softly in the darkness. And he would wonder, what lies out there? What stories wait to be lived? When his father passed away, leaving Sinbad with wealth enough to live a life of leisure, the young man made a choice. He would not spend his days in the marketplace counting coins, nor would he sit in gardens drinking sweet tea while the world turned without him. No, he would take his inheritance and transform it into something more precious than gold: experience, adventure, the living of a life fully awake. And so, one morning when the air was still cool and the sky blushed pink with dawn, Sinbad made his way down to the harbor of Basra, that great port where ships from every corner of the world gathered like birds coming home to roost. The harbor smelled of salt and tar and strange spices, of fish and wet rope and possibility. Sailors called to each other in a dozen languages. Merchants argued over prices. Seabirds wheeled overhead, crying their ancient songs. Sinbad found a merchant ship preparing to sail, a sturdy vessel with a crew of seasoned sailors whose skin was bronzed by sun and whose eyes held the distance of open water. He approached the captain, a man with a gray beard braided with colored thread, and offered to buy passage and cargo space. The captain looked him over, this young man with soft hands and fine clothes, and smiled beneath his beard. "The sea is not kind to dreamers," the captain said, his voice like gravel rolling in a wooden box. "Then I will learn to be more than a dreamer," Sinbad replied. and something in his voice, some quiet determination, made the captain nod. "Very well. We sail with the morning tide." And so Sinbad's first voyage began, not with thunder or trumpets, but with the gentle casting off of ropes, the slow unfurling of sails that caught the wind with a sound like breathing, and the subtle shift of the world as the ship moved away from the dock, away from the known, out toward the endless blue. For the first days, Sinbad stood at the rail and watched his old life shrink behind him, first the harbor growing small, then the city becoming a smudge of white and gold against the brown earth, then the land itself sinking below the horizon, until there was nothing in any direction but water and sky, sky and water, meeting at a line so far away it seemed drawn by the hand of God himself. The ship moved with the rhythm that would become as familiar to Sinbad as his own heartbeat. The gentle rise and fall, the creak of wood, the snap of canvas, the constant whisper of water against the hull. He learned the sailors' ways, their songs and their silence, their respect for the moods of the sea. He learned to read the clouds and feel the shift in the wind. He learned that the ocean was not one thing but 1,000 things, sometimes mirror smooth and silver, sometimes rolling with swells that lifted the ship like a mother's hand, sometimes gray and restless beneath racing clouds. Days became weeks. The sun traced its arc. The stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The ship sailed on, stopping at ports where Sinbad traded goods and marveled at new customs, new faces, new ways of living. He began to understand that the world was far larger and stranger than he had ever imagined, that every horizon promised another horizon beyond it, that wonder was not a destination, but a way of seeing. And then, one morning after many days at sea, when the sun rose like a copper coin from the water's edge, the lookout called down from the crow's nest, "Land ho! Island ahead!" The crew stirred with interest. Fresh water would be welcome, fresh food even more so. The island that emerged from the morning mist seemed a gift from heaven, green and lush, with gentle slopes rising from white beaches, with what appeared to be meadows of soft grass and groves of trees bearing fruit. Even from a distance, it looked peaceful, inviting, a place to rest weary bodies and refill empty barrels. The captain studied it through his glass, then nodded. "We'll anchor and go ashore, but carefully. The sea keeps many secrets." The ship dropped anchor in a bay of water so clear you could see fish darting like silver needles through shafts of sunlight. Sinbad and several crew members climbed into a small boat and rowed toward the beach, their oars dipping and pulling, in a rhythm as old as boats themselves. The water was warm. The air smelled of salt and something sweet, flowers perhaps, or ripe fruit carried on the breeze. They pulled the boat up onto the sand, which was soft and white as ground pearls. Sinbad stepped onto the island and felt the solid earth beneath his feet. How strange it felt after weeks of constant motion, how still and firm and welcoming. The island seemed perfect, almost too perfect. The grass was soft as a carpet. The trees were heavy with fruit, dates and figs and others Sinbad did not recognize. A small spring of fresh water bubbled up among smooth stones, its water cold and sweet. The crew spread out, laughing, filling their water barrels, gathering fruit, some even lying down in the soft grass to rest, too, feel stillness after so much motion. Sinbad wandered a little way inland, marveling at this paradise. The ground was warm beneath his feet, heated by the sun. Birds sang in the trees, or were they birds? The sounds were beautiful but strange, unlike any bird song he knew. Everything here seemed slightly different, slightly apart from the ordinary world, as if the island existed in a dream from which they had just awakened. Some of the sailors built a fire to cook the fish they had caught. They gathered wood, though there was something odd about the wood, Sinbad thought, something about the way it lay on the ground, smooth and gray, almost like... But no, he pushed the thought away. He was tired. His mind was playing tricks. The fire grew, crackling cheerfully, sending up smoke that rose straight into the still air. The smell of cooking fish made Sinbad's stomach rumble. How good it would be to eat something hot, something that didn't come from the ship's stores of dried meat and hard biscuit. And then something changed. It was subtle at first, a trembling beneath their feet, so slight it might have been imagination. Then stronger. The ground began to shake, gently at first, then with more insistence. Sinbad looked at his companions, saw confusion in their faces. An earthquake? Here, on this small island? And then, and this is where the story becomes strange, where the familiar world tilts and reveals its hidden marvels, the entire island began to move. Not just shake, move. The ground beneath them rose up, tilted, shifted. Men stumbled and cried out. The fire scattered, sending embers flying. The trees swayed as if in a great wind, though the air was still. And beneath their feet, beneath the grass and soil, something massive stirred, something that had been sleeping and was now awakening. "Back to the boat!" someone screamed. "Back to the ship!" Sinbad ran, his heart pounding, his mind struggling to understand what was happening. The ground rolled beneath him like water, like waves. And then, as he reached the beach and looked back, he saw the truth that would have seemed impossible had he not witnessed it with his own eyes. The island was not an island at all. It was alive. Slowly, ponderously, impossibly, the great mass began to sink. Water rushed up around its edges. What they had thought was a hill was actually a vast, curved back. What they had mistaken for rocky outcroppings were fins, large as houses. And as it submerged, as the water claimed it back, Sinbad caught a glimpse of something massive and dark moving beneath the surface. A tail, perhaps, or a flipper, impossible to tell, too large to comprehend. They had been standing on a whale, a creature so enormous that its back had accumulated soil and sand, had grown grass and even trees during its long, peaceful sleep in the warm waters. And their fire, their innocent cooking fire, had warmed its skin enough to wake it from its slumber, to remind it that it was not an island but a living thing, and that it was time to dive back down into the cool depths from which it had come. The sailors scrambled into the small boat, rowing frantically toward the ship. But the whale's descent created currents, eddies, swirls of water that pulled and pushed. The small boat spun, took on water. Men shouted, grabbed for oars, for the sides, for anything solid. Sinbad found himself in the water, the warm, salt sea closing over his head. He kicked upward, broke the surface, gasped for air. Around him, chaos. Men swimming, the boat capsized, the ship in the distance with its anchor being hauled up in desperate haste, the captain knowing that to stay was to risk being pulled down by the currents of the diving whale. Sinbad swam toward the ship with all his strength, his arms pulling, his legs kicking, but the currents were too strong, the distance too great. He saw the ship's sails fill with wind. He heard, faint across the water, the captain's voice calling commands. The ship began to move, slowly at first, then faster, catching the wind, moving away, growing smaller. And Sinbad understood, with a clarity that was almost peaceful, that he would not reach it, that the ship would sail on without him, that he was alone now, alone in the vast ocean, with nothing but the strength of his arms and the will to survive. But even as despair touched his heart, something bumped against him in the water. A piece of wood, one of the water barrels, large and empty and buoyant, broken free from their stores. Sinbad grabbed it, wrapped his arms around it, let it hold him up. His breath came in gasps, his heart hammered, but he was afloat. He was alive. The sun climbed higher in the sky, hot and merciless. The water that had seemed so warm now seemed endless, stretching in every direction, empty of everything but waves that rolled and rolled, lifting Sinbad up and down, in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The ship was gone, vanished over the horizon. The whale, if it had ever truly been there, was gone too, sunk back to whatever deep home it kept in the ocean's heart. Sinbad clung to the barrel. He had no food, no water, no plan. But he was young and strong, and life beat fierce in his veins. He would not give up. He would not surrender to the sea, not yet, not while breath still moved in his lungs. Hours passed. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose and violet. Sinbad's lips were dry, cracked by salt. His arms ached from holding the barrel. His eyes, sun-dazzled, saw mirages, ships that weren't there, islands that dissolved when he blinked, birds that might have been clouds. And then, as the light softened to the gentle gold of evening, he saw something real, a shape on the water, dark against the setting sun, too solid to be a mirage, too near to be a dream. Land, a true island this time. He could see beaches, trees, the solid permanence of earth that did not move, did not breathe, did not threaten to sink beneath him. Hope surged in his chest like a bird taking flight. He kicked his tired legs, paddled with one arm while holding the barrel with the other, moving toward that blessed shore with the last reserves of his strength. The waves helped him, carrying him forward, lifting him up and pushing him toward the beach. As the water grew shallower, he felt sand beneath his feet, solid, blessed, unmoving sand. He stumbled forward, left the barrel floating behind him, walked on legs that trembled and shook, and finally collapsed on the beach just above the waterline, his cheek against the cool sand, his breath ragged, his body exhausted but alive, alive, miraculously alive. Sinbad lay there as the light faded, as the stars began to emerge one by one, as the moon rose full and bright over the water. He had lost everything, his ship, his goods, his companions. He had no idea where he was, no map, no guide. He knew only that he had survived the impossible, that he had ridden on the back of a whale and lived to tell the tale, that the world was far stranger and more wondrous and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And as he lay there, feeling the solid earth beneath him, feeling the cool breeze dry the salt on his skin, feeling the life pulse steady and strong in his veins, he knew something else too. This was only the beginning. His journey had just begun. The horizons he had dreamed of were opening before him, one after another, each one revealing new wonders, new challenges, new lessons written in water and wind and the patient wisdom of survival. But for now, for this moment, he simply breathed, in and out, alive on an unknown shore, beneath a sky full of stars, with all the mystery of tomorrow waiting like an unopened gift. When morning came, soft and gray with mist, Sinbad woke to find himself still on the beach, stiff and sore but rested. The events of the previous day seemed almost dreamlike in the gentle dawn light. Had he really stood on a living island? Had he really been cast adrift and found his way here? The ache in his muscles and the salt dried white on his clothes told him yes, it had all been real, every impossible moment of it. He sat up slowly, taking stock of his situation. He had nothing, no food, no water, no tools, no weapons, only his mind and his body and his will to survive. But he had been raised with stories of travelers who had endured worse, of prophets who had wandered in deserts, of heroes who had overcome impossible odds. If they could survive, so could he. The island before him was lush and green, different from the whale island of yesterday. This one had the feel of permanence, tall trees with thick trunks, vines hanging in curtains of green, the sound of birds calling from the canopy, and, somewhere in the distance, the musical trickle of running water. Water. The thought of it made Sinbad's parched throat ache. He stood on shaky legs and made his way inland, following the sound. The forest was dense but not impassable. Shafts of golden sunlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating ferns and flowers and butterflies that danced in the warm air. Everything here seemed vibrant with life, as if the island itself were a beating heart. He found the stream quickly, clear water running over smooth stones, cold from some underground spring. Sinbad knelt and drank deeply, feeling the water flow into him like a blessing, reviving his body, clearing his mind. He drank until his belly was full, then sat back on his heels and looked around with clearer eyes. This island could sustain him, he realized. There were fruits in the trees. He recognized some of them, dates and coconuts and others that looked edible. There would be fish in the streams, shellfish on the beach. He would not starve. He would not die of thirst. He could survive here while he figured out his next move. But Sinbad did not want merely to survive. He wanted to understand where he was, whether others lived here, whether there was any way to return to the world of men and ships and cities. And so, after drinking his fill and eating some fruit he carefully tested first, he began to explore. The island was larger than he had first thought. He walked for hours, climbing gentle slopes and descending into valleys thick with vegetation. He found no signs of human habitation, no houses, no paths, no cultivated fields. But he did find something else, something that made him stop in wonder. In a clearing on a hillside, surrounded by flowering trees that filled the air with sweetness, stood a great dome of white stone. It rose from the earth like a small mountain, perfectly smooth, perfectly round, with no visible door or window or seam. It was perhaps 50 feet high, twice as wide, gleaming in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the trees. Sinbad approached it slowly, his hand extended, until his fingers touched the surface. It was warm, sun-heated, and smooth as polished marble. He walked around its circumference, looking for any clue as to what it was, who had built it, what purpose it served. But there was nothing, just this enormous, enigmatic dome sitting in a clearing like a giant pearl dropped from the sky. What could it be? A temple? A tomb? Some ancient monument left by a civilization long vanished? Sinbad placed his ear against the surface, listening, but heard nothing. He knocked on it, but the sound was dull, absorbed immediately, as if the structure was incredibly thick or filled with something that dampened all vibration. Puzzled, but fascinated, Sinbad sat down in the shade nearby to rest and think. The afternoon sun was warm, the air sweet with flower scent. Bees hummed in the blossoms. Somewhere, a bird sang a liquid song. It would be easy, he thought, to fall asleep here, to let the mystery wait while his tired body rested in this peaceful place. But sleep was driven away by a sudden change in the light. The sun, which had been shining bright and clear, was suddenly blocked, as if an enormous cloud had passed overhead. The clearing fell into shadow, cool and deep. Sinbad looked up, expecting to see storm clouds gathering. Instead, he saw wings. Wings so vast they seemed to span from horizon to horizon, blotting out the sky. Wings that beat with a sound like thunder, creating winds that bent the trees and sent leaves flying in spiraling patterns. And attached to those wings, a body, a bird, but a bird beyond all measure, beyond all imagining, a bird so large that the eagles Sinbad had seen in the mountains near Baghdad would have seemed like sparrows in comparison. This was a roc, a creature Sinbad had heard of in stories, in sailors' tales told in port taverns, in legends, whispered by old men who claimed to have seen wonders. But seeing it now, real and massive and impossibly alive, made all those stories seem pale and small. The roc descended slowly, its wings creating great downdrafts that pressed Sinbad flat against the ground. He watched, awestruck and terrified, as the enormous bird landed beside the white dome, its talons, each one as large as a ship's mast, gripping the earth. And then, with movements surprisingly gentle for something so vast, the roc settled itself over the dome, spreading its wings around it like a mother bird settling over her nest. And Sinbad understood. The dome was not a dome at all. It was an egg. The rock's egg, left here while the parent bird hunted across the vast ocean, now being warmed and protected by the creature that had laid it. The rock's head turned, and for a moment, one enormous eye, golden and ancient and utterly alien, fixed on Sinbad. He held his breath, not daring to move, not daring even to think loudly. He was smaller than a mouse to this creature, less significant than an ant. If the rock decided he was a threat to its egg, it could end his life with a casual flick of its beak. But the rock, after regarding him for a long moment, seemed to decide he was too small to matter. It tucked its head under one wing and settled into stillness, a mountain of feathers breathing slowly in the quiet afternoon. Sinbad waited until he was sure the creature was resting, perhaps even sleeping, before he dared to move. He crawled backward, slowly, carefully, making no sound, until he was far enough away to stand and slip back into the forest. His heart hammered in his chest. His hands shook with the aftermath of fear, but his mind was racing with possibilities. Here was his escape from the island. If he could somehow attach himself to the rock when it flew, it would carry him away from here, back toward the shipping lanes, toward places where men and ships traveled. It was a desperate plan, a dangerous plan, perhaps even a foolish plan. But it was a plan, and a plan was better than resignation. As evening approached, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold, Sinbad returned to the beach where he had first landed. He needed rope, or something like rope, to bind himself to the rock's leg. The vines growing in the forest would serve. They were thick and strong, used to bearing the weight of their own length as they climbed toward sunlight. He gathered the longest, strongest vines he could find, testing each one, weaving them together to create a rope that would hold his weight. The work was slow and careful, done by the fading light and then by moonlight, his fingers working steadily, braiding and knotting, creating a lifeline that would either save him or fail him. When he was done, when he had a length of vine rope as long as his height, strong and flexible and secure, he lay down on the sand to rest. Tomorrow he would return to the clearing. Tomorrow he would attempt the impossible. Tomorrow he would either fly or die, but either way, he would not simply wait on this island for time to pass. The night was long and restless. Sinbad slept in fits and starts, dreaming of wings that filled the sky, of falling through clouds, of the moment when his makeshift rope might fray and break, sending him tumbling into the endless blue. But when dawn came, gray and soft with morning mist, he rose with clear purpose. He made his way back through the forest, carrying his vine rope coiled over his shoulder. The clearing was still shadowed, the rock still settled over its enormous egg, motionless as a hill of feathers. Sinbad crept closer, his breath shallow, his movements careful as a stalking cat. The rock's legs were like tree trunks, thick and powerful, and covered with scales that gleamed dully in the early light. Sinbad approached the nearest one, moving so slowly that each step took a full minute. He could hear the creature's breathing, deep and slow, like wind moving through a cavern. When he was close enough to touch the rock's leg, Sinbad carefully wrapped his rope around it, looping it several times, tying knots that would hold, but could be released if needed. Then he tied the other end around his own waist, securing himself to this living mountain with knots that sailors had taught him, knots that held fast under strain. And then he waited. The sun rose higher, burning off the morning mist. The clearing grew warm. Birds began their days singing, and still the rock slept, breathing its slow breath, dreaming whatever dreams such creatures dream. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, the rock stirred. Its head emerged from beneath its wing. It stretched, a movement that seemed to take minutes to complete, wings extending to their full, impossible span, blotting out the sun. Sinbad felt the rope tighten around his waist as the leg he was tied to shifted. The rock bent its head and seemed to inspect its egg, running its beak gently across the smooth surface. Then, apparently satisfied, it prepared to depart. The massive wings began to beat, slowly at first, then faster. Wind roared through the clearing, trees bent and swayed, dust and leaves flew in spiraling patterns, and then, impossibly, incredibly, the rock lifted off the ground. Sinbad felt himself yanked upward with terrifying speed. The ground dropped away beneath him, first feet, then yards, then hundreds of yards. The clearing became a green spot, the island a patch of dark surrounded by blue, the ocean a vast, wrinkled plain stretching to every horizon. The wind screamed past him, tearing at his clothes, making his eyes water. His stomach lurched with the speed and height. Below him, the rock's legs swung with each beat of those enormous wings, and Sinbad swung with it, a tiny weight barely noticed by the creature that carried him. They climbed higher and higher until the air grew thin and cold. Clouds formed below them, a white landscape of vapor that looked solid enough to walk on. The sun blazed bright and fierce without the filter of lower atmosphere. Sinbad had never imagined such heights existed, had never dreamed that anything could fly so high, so fast, so far above the ordinary world. His hands were numb with cold. His face felt frozen. But he did not dare try to climb the rope to get closer to the rock's warm body. Any movement might alert the creature to his presence, might make it shake him off like an annoying insect. So he hung there, enduring, surviving, watching the world transform beneath him. They flew for hours, or what felt like hours, though time seemed strange at this altitude, stretched and compressed simultaneously. The sun moved across the sky. The landscape below changed from ocean to land and back to ocean. Sinbad saw coastlines and rivers, mountains and forests, all reduced to patterns of color and texture, a map drawn by God's own hand. And then, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the rock began to descend as well. Sinbad felt his stomach drop as they fell, quickly and smoothly, through layers of cloud and into warmer air. The ground rushed up to meet them, and what ground! A strange landscape of steep valleys and sharp peaks, of bare rock and sparse vegetation, utterly different from the lush island they had left behind. The rock landed on a rocky outcropping high on a mountainside, its talons gripping the stone, and as soon as it was settled, Sinbad quickly untied the rope from around its leg, freeing himself before the creature noticed him. He scrambled away, hiding behind a boulder, watching as the rock bent its head and plucked something from the rocks, a snake, enormous and writhing, which the bird swallowed in one gulp. Then, its hunger apparently satisfied, the rock spread its wings once more and launched itself into the air, flying away toward distant mountains, shrinking until it was just a speck against the sky, then vanishing entirely. Sinbad was alone again, but this time in a place utterly unlike anywhere he had been before. He looked around, trying to understand where the rock had brought him, trying to make sense of this harsh landscape of stone and shadow. And then he saw something that made his breath catch, something that made his heart race with wonder and disbelief. The valley below him, the deep, narrow valley between these harsh peaks, was strewn with diamonds. Thousands of them, millions perhaps, catching the fading sunlight and throwing it back in rainbow flashes, carpeting the valley floor with crystalline fire, a treasure beyond measure lying in a place so remote and dangerous that no man could hope to reach it and live. Sinbad stood on that mountainside as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and purple, and stared down at the Valley of Diamonds. His practical mind, trained by his merchant father, automatically calculated their value. A single handful of those stones would make a man wealthy. A sackful would make him rich as a prince. But what good was wealth if you were trapped in a place from which you could not escape? The valley was bordered by cliffs so steep they seemed to have been cut with a knife. The walls were smooth stone, offering no handholds, no way to climb down or back up. Even if Sinbad could somehow reach the valley floor, he would be trapped there, surrounded by riches but unable to leave, like a prisoner in a cell made of treasure. As darkness gathered and the first stars appeared, Sinbad found a sheltered spot among the rocks and settled down to rest. His body ached from the day's impossible journey, from clinging to the rock's leg for hours, from the cold of high altitude, from the fear and exhilaration of flight. But his mind would not rest. It turned and turned, examining the problem before him. He needed food. He needed water. He needed a way off this mountain. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought was forming about those diamonds, about the valley, about a way that men might harvest such treasure from such an impossible place. But the thought was incomplete, hovering just beyond his grasp, like a word he couldn't quite remember. He slept fitfully that night, cold and uncomfortable on the hard stone, his dreams filled with falling and flying, with gems that sparkled like stars, with the golden eyes of the rock watching him from impossible heights. When dawn came, gray and cold, Sinbad woke stiff and desperately thirsty. His lips were cracked, his throat felt like sand. He needed to find water, and quickly, or the diamonds below would become nothing more than pretty stones to mark his grave. He began to explore the mountainside, moving carefully on the treacherous slopes, looking for any sign of water or vegetation. The sun rose higher, and with it came heat that reflected off the bare stone, making the air shimmer. Sinbad's head began to ache, his vision blurred at the edges. Desperation touched his heart with cold fingers. And then, as he rounded a shoulder of rock, he heard something that made him freeze in wonder. Voices. Human voices, distant and faint, but unmistakably human, echoing from somewhere above him. He looked up and saw, silhouetted against the bright sky, figures standing at the very edge of the cliff top. Men. Real men, not spirits or illusions born of desperation. They were looking down into the valley, pointing, talking among themselves in a language Sinbad could not quite make out from this distance. Hope surged in his chest like a bird taking flight. Where there were men, there was the possibility of rescue, of help, of return to the world he knew. He opened his mouth to call out to them, to wave his arms and attract their attention. But before he could make a sound, one of the men picked up something, a large bundle it looked like, and threw it over the edge. It fell, tumbling end over end, and landed with a heavy thud at the bottom of the valley, among the diamonds. Sinbad watched, puzzled. Why would they throw things into the valley? He watched more carefully as another bundle was thrown, and then another, each one landing in different spots on the valley floor. The men seemed to be working with purpose, with a system, as if they had done this many times before. And then the men disappeared from the cliff edge, and silence returned to the mountain. But not for long. From somewhere in the distance came a sound Sinbad recognized, the cry of great birds, the beating of enormous wings. And then, sweeping down into the valley from the other side, came not one rock but several, smaller than the one that had carried him but still massive beyond belief, their wingspans wider than houses, their talons gleaming in the sunlight. The rocks descended into the valley, and Sinbad suddenly understood the cunning plan of the men above. The bundles they had thrown were pieces of meat, raw flesh from sheep or cattle, large and bloody. And when the rocks picked up these pieces of meat in their talons to carry back to their nests, diamonds stuck to the blood and flesh, caught in the sticky residue, carried up and out of the unreachable valley by the birds themselves. It was brilliant, Sinbad thought. The valley was impossible for men to enter and escape from, but the rocks could come and go as they pleased. So the diamond hunters used the birds as their harvesters, throwing down bait and waiting for the rocks to bring up not just meat, but treasure. And then, like light breaking through clouds, an idea came to Sinbad. If meat could be carried up by the rocks, why not a man? He was probably lighter than the large chunks of mutton or beef they were throwing. If he could somehow get down into the valley and attach himself to a piece of meat, a rock might carry him up and out, back to where the men waited. It was dangerous. It was perhaps insane. But what choice did he have? To stay here was to die slowly of thirst and hunger. At least this plan offered hope, however slim. Sinbad studied the cliff face below him. It was steep, but not quite vertical in all places. There were cracks and ledges, narrow pathways where wind and water had worn the stone. It would be treacherous, and one wrong step would send him falling to his death. But it might, just might, be possible to climb down. He had no rope now, having left his vine rope tied to a bush on the island. He had only his hands and feet, his courage, and his desperate need to survive. He took a deep breath, whispered a prayer to Allah, and began to descend. The climb down was the longest and most terrifying of Sinbad's life. He moved inch by inch, testing every handhold, every foothold, before trusting his weight to it. Loose stones skittered away beneath his feet, falling and falling, taking seconds to hit bottom, a reminder of how far he would fall if he slipped. His fingers bled, his muscles screamed, sweat ran into his eyes despite the cold wind that blew across the cliff face. But he did not stop. He could not stop. To stop was to give up, and Sinbad had not come this far, had not survived a whale island and a flight with a rock, only to give up now. Time lost all meaning. There was only the next handhold, the next foothold, the next few inches of stone. The sun climbed toward noon, shadows shifted, and slowly, impossibly slowly, Sinbad descended. When his feet finally touched the valley floor, he almost wept with relief. He stood on shaky legs, looking around at the impossible treasure that surrounded him. Diamonds lay everywhere, some as small as peas, others as large as eggs, all of them catching the light and splitting it into rainbows. The ground crunched beneath his feet with the sound of wealth beyond measure. But Sinbad did not stop to gather diamonds. Not yet. First, he needed to ensure his escape. He looked around and spotted one of the pieces of meat that had been thrown down. A large chunk of mutton, still fresh, lying among the gems. Several diamonds had already stuck to its bloody surface. Sinbad had an idea. He took off his outer robe and began gathering diamonds, choosing the largest and clearest, wrapping them carefully in the cloth. When he had as many as the robe could hold, he tied it securely into a bundle and strapped it to his back. Then he went to the chunk of meat, and taking a deep breath to steel himself against the unpleasantness, lay down on top of it, on his back, with his bundle of diamonds beneath him. He used his belt and what remained of his rope to tie himself to the meat as securely as he could. And then he waited, lying on cold mutton in a valley of diamonds, staring up at the narrow strip of sky visible between the cliff walls, hoping that his plan would work, hoping that a rock would come soon, before the sun made the meat spoil, before his courage failed. He did not have to wait long. The shadow came first, a darkness sweeping across the valley floor, then the rush of wind, the thunder of wings. Sinbad closed his eyes and held his breath as enormous talons closed around the meat, gripping it with crushing force. For a terrible moment, he thought the talons would pierce through the meat and through him as well. But they held. And then the world dropped away as the rock lifted its prize and began to climb. Up they went, faster than any climb Sinbad had made, faster than seemed possible. The cliff walls blurred past. The valley fell away beneath them. Wind roared in Sinbad's ears. His stomach lurched. But he held on, tied to the meat, trusting in the knots he had made, trusting in the strength of the rock, trusting in the will of Allah that had preserved him thus far. They cleared the cliff top, and the rock flew onward, toward a rocky outcropping where, Sinbad assumed, it had its nest. But before they reached it, something unexpected happened. Men began shouting, waving their arms, banging on pots and drums, creating a tremendous noise. The startled rock, thinking perhaps that its meal was being threatened, dropped the meat and wheeled away, crying out in protest, flying off to find a quieter place to eat. The meat fell, and Sinbad with it, but only for a few feet before landing with a heavy thump on rocky ground. The breath was knocked from his lungs, stars danced in his vision, but nothing was broken. He was alive. He had made it out of the valley. Sinbad quickly untied himself and stood, just as the diamond hunters came running toward him. They stopped in shock when they saw him, a man where they had expected only meat and diamonds. They stared, their mouths open, their eyes wide. "Peace be upon you, brothers," Sinbad said, his voice hoarse but steady. "I am Sinbad of Baghdad, and I have a story to tell you that you will scarcely believe." The men helped him to their camp, gave him water and food, and listened in amazement as Sinbad told them of the Whale Island, of his voyage with the rock, of his descent into the Valley of Diamonds. And when he opened his bundle to show them the gems he had collected, their eyes widened further. These were honest men, these diamond hunters, working under the authority of a local king. By the custom of their trade, Sinbad was entitled to keep the diamonds he had brought up, a fortune that would make him wealthy beyond his dreams. In return, Sinbad shared generously with them, giving them gems from his collection as thanks for the food and water that had saved his life. The diamond hunters were traveling merchants as well, and when their season of hunting was done, they were heading back to the coast, to the city of Basra, where ships from every nation came to trade. They invited Sinbad to join them, and he accepted, gratefully. The journey back to civilization took many days, traveling with the caravan across mountains and through valleys, through lands Sinbad had never seen, among people whose customs and languages were strange to him. But he was traveling toward home now, toward the world of ships and cities and familiar things. When they finally reached Basra, and Sinbad saw the harbor spread before him, smelled the salt air and heard the cry of seabirds, something in his chest loosened. He had survived. Against all odds, against all reason, he had survived wonders and terrors that would have killed a lesser man. In Basra, Sinbad sold some of his diamonds, keeping others for himself, and found himself wealthier than his father had ever been. He could have stayed there, could have retired to a life of ease and comfort. But the voyage had changed him. The young man who had left Baghdad seeking adventure had returned older, wiser, marked by experience that no amount of gold could buy. The merchant who purchased his diamonds looked at the stones with wonder, turning them in the light, marveling at their perfect clarity, their extraordinary size. "Where did you find such treasures?" he asked. "I have been in the gem trade for 40 years, and I have never seen their equal." Sinbad smiled, thinking of the valley, of the serpents, of the eagles, and the merchants who threw their sheep into the depths. "They came from a place very far from here," he said, "a place of both danger and wonder, a place I may never see again, but will never forget." He kept the finest diamonds for himself, not out of greed, but as reminders. Each stone held a memory. This one he had grabbed while running from a serpent's hiss. That one he had found clutched tight in his fist when he woke on the rock's leg. Another had pressed against his palm during the long flight back to civilization. They were not just wealth, they were pieces of his journey, crystallized moments of fear and triumph, desperation and deliverance. He made arrangements to return to Baghdad, traveling with a merchant caravan across the familiar desert. The journey took many days, and Sinbad found himself grateful for the slow pace, the gentle rhythm of camels walking, the nights camping beneath stars that seemed both strange and familiar now that he had seen them from the back of a giant bird, from heights where the air grows thin and the world spreads out below like a dream. The other merchants in the caravan were curious about him. They had heard rumors, a sailor who survived a whale island, who flew on a rock, who escaped from a valley of serpents with pockets full of diamonds. They asked him to tell his story, and he did, night after night around the fire, watching their faces as they listened, seeing their wonder and disbelief and the hunger that adventure kindles in human hearts. And when he finally saw the walls of his home city rise from the sand, when he passed through the gates and heard the call to prayer echoing from the minarets, when he walked the streets where he had grown up, he felt both the comfort of homecoming and the restlessness of a man who has seen the world and knows he cannot unsee it. The city was exactly as he had left it, the same narrow streets, the same bustling markets, the same smells of spices and cooking food, the same calls of vendors and laughter of children. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had changed, because he had changed, and the world looks different to different eyes. Sinbad returned to his house, which his servants had maintained in his absence. They greeted him with tears of joy and relief, for they had feared him lost, had prepared themselves to mourn a master who would never return. He embraced them, distributed gifts from his travels, and told them abbreviated versions of his adventures, leaving out the worst terrors so as not to frighten them. He stored his diamonds carefully in a locked chest in his private cash chamber. He distributed generous gifts to the poor of his neighborhood, remembering how the merchants of the valley had helped him when he was desperate and stranded. He visited the mosque to offer prayers of gratitude for his survival, for the miracle of being alive and home when so many moments of the voyage could have ended otherwise. And then he began to settle back into the rhythms of city life. Days of meetings with other merchants, discussions of trade and prices and opportunities, evenings of dining with friends, listening to their ordinary concerns about business and family, nights of sleeping in his own bed, soft and comfortable, and utterly unlike the hard deck of a ship, or the rocky floor of a valley, or the strange terrain of a rock's leg. But at night, on his rooftop beneath the stars, he would look out toward the desert and think of the ocean beyond it, of islands that moved and birds that blocked out the sun, of valleys filled with impossible treasure and adventures yet to come. He would hold one of his diamonds up to catch the moonlight, and in its facets he would see reflections of all he had experienced, all he had survived, all he had become. His friends and family were happy to have him home. They celebrated his return, marveled at his wealth, listened to his stories with fascination. But some of them also looked at him strangely, as though they could see how the journey had marked him, had set him apart from them in ways that went deeper than mere adventure. "You're different," his sister said to him one evening as they sat in the garden of his house. "Not bad different, but changed. You seem both here and not here, present but also far away." Sinbad nodded. "The ocean does that to you. Once you've seen how vast the world is, how full of wonders and terrors, how small you are in the face of it all, you can never quite settle back into thinking your street, your city, your ordinary life is the whole of existence. Part of me will always be out there, on the waves, wondering what lies beyond the next horizon." For this had been only his first voyage, and already Sinbad knew there would be others. The horizons still called to him. The unknown still beckoned. He had tasted adventure and found it both terrible and wonderful, both dangerous and intoxicating, and he knew he would sail again. Not immediately. He needed time to rest, to recover, to let the terror fade and the wonder grow bright in his memory. He needed time to enjoy his wealth, to appreciate being alive and safe, to remember why home mattered. But eventually, inevitably, he would return to the docks, would book passage on another ship, would sail toward another horizon, because something essential had awakened in him during that first voyage. He had discovered that he was brave when he needed to be, resourceful when desperate, capable of surviving things that would have destroyed a lesser man. He had learned that the world was far larger and stranger than he had imagined, full of marvels that existed beyond the edge of maps, beyond the limit of common knowledge. And having tasted that, having seen the impossible made real, having survived the unsurvivable, having brought back diamonds from a valley of serpents, how could he be content with an ordinary life? How could he sit in his comfortable house and pretend that the adventures he had lived were enough, that his curiosity was satisfied, that the call of the ocean had gone silent? He couldn't. He wouldn't. The sea was in his blood now, the adventure in his bones, the restlessness in his soul. But that is a story for another night. For now, as the stars wheel overhead and the moon traces its silver path across the sky, we will leave Sinbad in Baghdad, safe in his home, wealthy beyond measure, his first voyage complete, his heart already dreaming of the next horizon. We will leave him standing on his rooftop, a diamond held up to the moonlight, his face turned toward the desert and the ocean beyond it, his mind full of memories and possibilities, his spirit already planning the next departure. And you, dear listener, you have traveled far with Sinbad today. You have stood on the back of a sleeping whale and felt the world shift beneath your feet when the great creature woke and dove. You have clung desperately to a piece of driftwood as the ocean swallowed your ship. You have wandered, lost and alone on a strange island, finding fruit trees and fresh streams, surviving when survival seemed impossible. You have flown through clouds on the leg of a giant bird, seeing the world spread below you like a painted map, mountains and valleys and rivers tiny as drawings, the curve of the earth visible from that impossible height. You have felt the rush of wind and the terror of flight and the wonder of seeing creation from a bird's perspective. You have climbed down impossible cliffs into a valley that glittered with diamonds, more wealth than 1,000 merchants could carry. You have walked carefully among serpents whose poison could kill with a touch, whose sizes defied belief. You have hidden in terror and emerged in triumph, your pockets full of stones that would make you wealthy beyond dreams. What a journey it has been. What wonders you have witnessed, what terrors you have survived, what impossible things you have seen made real, and all of it from the safety and comfort of your bed, your soft pillow, your warm blankets, your safe room where no serpents lurk, and no whales dive, and no rocks fly. Now it is time to let the journey end, to let the adventure settle into memory, to let the excitement transform into the gentle peace of ending. The story has been told. The voyage is complete. Sinbad is home, and so are you. Sinbad sleeps in his house in Baghdad tonight, safe and sound, his traveling done for now. His chest of diamonds is locked away. His house is quiet and peaceful. His bed is soft. His dreams are full of oceans and islands, whales and birds, valleys that sparkle with impossible treasure. But these are good dreams, adventure dreams, memories transformed by sleep into gentler visions. The whale swims in warm oceans somewhere far away, dreaming its slow dreams of depths and currents and the long migrations of its kind. It has forgotten the sailors who once lit fires on its back, forgotten the disruption of its sleep. It is simply a whale again, swimming, breathing, living its ancient whale life in the vastness of the sea. The rock sits on its egg in a clearing far away, patient and eternal, keeping its vigil, warming the life within the shell. It has forgotten the tiny human who clung to its leg for one brief flight. To a creature of such size and age, humans are like mayflies, present for a moment, then gone, barely noticed, quickly forgotten. The diamonds sparkle in their valley, waiting for the next brave soul to find them, to dare the serpents, to claim the treasure, and escape with it. Some of them, stones are gone now, carried away by Sinbad and the merchants who used their clever sheep method. But countless others remain, patient as only stones can be, glittering in the darkness, waiting for the next chapter of their story. And the ocean rolls on, vast and mysterious, keeping its secrets, telling its stories to those who dare to listen, offering its adventures to those brave enough or foolish enough to seek them. It will carry other ships, will challenge other sailors, will transform other lives. The ocean is eternal, patient, full of wonders that no single lifetime could exhaust. Everything is complete. Everything is finished for tonight. The story has been told, and now it is time. Time for rest, time for peace, time for sleep, time to let go of adventures and sink into the gentle darkness where tired travelers find their rest. Feel how heavy your body has become. how comfortable and relaxed. Every muscle has softened, releasing all the tension of the day, all the holding, all the effort. Your arms lie heavy wherever they rest. Your legs have grown so relaxed, they feel almost as though they're melting into the bed. Your back presses into the surface beneath you, supported completely, held by something solid and safe. Every thought has drifted away like a boat on gentle water, floating off into the distance, becoming smaller and less important until it disappears entirely over the horizon of consciousness. You are sinking down, down into the mattress, into warmth, into darkness, into the sweet embrace of sleep. Your breathing has become so slow, so steady, so peaceful. You don't have to think about it, don't have to control it, don't have to do anything at all. Your body breathes itself, in and out, with the gentle rhythm of waves on a calm shore, with the patient rhythm of the earth itself, turning through space. Each breath in brings calm like a tide rolling in, filling you with peace and relaxation. Each breath out carries away everything else, all tension, all awareness, all connection to the waking world. Everything unnecessary flows out with your exhale, leaving only peace, only quiet, only the deep contentment of a body preparing for sleep. You are floating now in that beautiful space between waking and sleeping, that twilight place where stories live and dreams are born, where the boundaries blur and anything seems possible. It is the same space where Sinbad might have floated after his adventures, that place between trauma and memory, between experience and story, between the raw edge of survival and the gentle retrospective of tale-telling. Let yourself drift in this space. Let yourself float. There is nothing to hold on to, nothing to figure out, nothing to do but surrender to the gentle current that is carrying you towards sleep. The current is kind. The current is safe. The current knows where it's going even if you don't, and you can trust it to carry you to exactly where you need to be. The story is complete. The journey is over. Sinbad is home, and so are you. Both of you safe, both of you at peace, both of you ready to rest. The adventures of the day are finished. The concerns of tomorrow have not yet arrived. There is only this moment, this breath, this sweet dissolving into sleep. Your eyes are so heavy now, heavy as stones, heavy as anchors, heavy as diamonds in a merchant's pocket, pulled closed by the gentle weight of exhaustion and contentment. And that's good. That's perfect. Let them stay closed. Let them rest. There is nothing you need to see right now. The adventure is done. The wonders have been witnessed. Now is the time for darkness, for stillness, for the deep, healing rest of sleep. Behind your closed eyelids there is only gentle darkness. Not the frightening darkness of a valley of serpents, but the kind darkness of a peaceful night. The safe darkness of a comfortable room. The healing darkness where sleep lives and waits to embrace you. Feel yourself sinking deeper with each breath, sinking down through layers of consciousness, through thoughts and memories, through awareness itself, down past the surface chatter of the mind, down past the middle layers where worries and plans live, down to that deep place of pure rest, that place where sleep waits with open arms, patient and eternal, ready to receive you. You are so tired, so beautifully, perfectly tired. Your whole body knows it is time to sleep. Every cell, every fiber, every part of you is ready to surrender to the night. You have earned this rest through the day's living, through the stories listening, through simply being alive and present in the world. Let go now. Let go of everything. Let go of the story of Sinbad. It is finished, complete, safely stored in memory where you can revisit it tomorrow if you wish. Let go of the day that preceded this moment. It is past, done, unchangeable, requiring nothing more from you. Let go of yourself, of the person who listened and thought and felt. Just be now. Just breathe. Just drift, float, sink into the darkness that holds you so gently, so safely, so completely. The world fades away. The edges of your awareness grow soft and blurry. Sounds become distant and meaningless. If you hear them at all, they are like sounds heard underwater, muffled and far away, unable to reach you in the deep place where you're sinking. Thoughts dissolve like sugar in water, sweet for a moment, and then gone, leaving only clear emptiness, only peace. There is only this moment, this breath, this soft descent into sleep. And even this moment is fading now, becoming less defined, less solid, less real. You are letting go of even the present, sinking below it into timelessness, into the space where sleep lives beyond all moments, beyond all awareness, beyond everything except rest itself. You are safe. You are peaceful. You are loved and held by the universe itself, by the same vast intelligence that keeps the planets spinning, and the whales swimming, and the rocks flying, and the ocean rolling in its eternal rhythms. You are part of all of it, connected to everything, and everything conspires now to help you rest, to help you sleep, to help you heal and restore yourself in the darkness. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. Like Sinbad in his house in Baghdad, like the whale in the warm ocean, like the rock on its nest, like all creatures everywhere who have earned their rest. Sleep now. Let the last threads of consciousness unspool and drift away. Let awareness dim like a lamp running out of oil, growing fainter, fainter, until only darkness remains. Let yourself go completely, surrendering to sleep with the trust of a child, with the wisdom of someone who knows that sleep is not an ending, but a restoration, not a loss, but a return to the source. The diamonds of the valley sparkle one more time in your mind's eye, then fade to darkness. The ocean rolls one more wave across the shores of consciousness, then becomes still. The rock spreads its wings one final time across the sky of your awareness, then settles into stillness. And you, like Sinbad at the end of his voyage, find your way home to sleep, to rest, to the deep peace that waits at the end of every journey. Sleep, sleep, sleep.